It was supposed to be just another charity gala in downtown Austin. String quartets, clinking glasses, and rich folks patting themselves on the back for donating money they'd never miss. I had barely touched my sparkling water when she approached me. Linda, my boyfriend's mother. Impeccably dressed, perfume that smelled like old money, and eyes that looked through you like you were a store receipt. She sat beside me without asking, smiled like a southern belle, and slid a crisp envelope onto my lap. $50,000, she whispered. Cash. Walk away from Ryan, no drama. I blinked, thinking I misheard. Was this a prank? Some twisted trust fund test? But no, she was serious. She genuinely thought she could pay me to disappear like some inconvenience. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I didn't even touch the envelope. I just looked at her, dead in the eye. And what I saw wasn't power, it was fear. The kind of fear that comes from someone who's built their identity on control and status, and suddenly, someone like me, a girl from a two-bedroom in East Dallas, was threatening to rewrite her narrative. She thought I was a problem she could buy off. But that was her biggest mistake. Because I wasn't just some pretty face from the wrong zip code. I knew exactly what she was doing, and why. This wasn't just about money. It was about shame, about control, about protecting her image. And the craziest part? I wasn't even mad. I was done being small, done apologizing for who I was and where I came from. If this woman wanted war, she just declared it, with a check. But what she didn't realize was, she handed me the match, and I was about to light the whole illusion on fire. Now, if you're wondering what happened next, buckle up. Because this isn't your average Cinderella story. This is Texas. And down here, we don't just survive, we rise. With or without your 50 grand. Before the gala, before the envelope, before I knew what legacy families even meant, there was just him, Ryan. We met in the most unromantic way possible. A busted-up coffee shop near my night shift in East Dallas. I was studying abnormal psych between tables, and he walked in like a tech bro who got lost on his way to Whole Foods. Hoodie, AirPods, and a look like he hadn't slept since the last Bitcoin dip. But when he asked what I was reading, I didn't expect him to know the author. Hell, I didn't expect him to pronounce Bessel van der Kolk correctly. That was the first surprise. The second? He wasn't a tourist. He was visiting for a few months, working remote from his dad's private ranch outside Fort Worth. Something about getting out of Silicon Valley burnout. Honestly, I thought it was just a flex. But when he said he liked how I thought, I believed him. We started texting, then hanging out, then late-night drives to nowhere, just talking about trauma, trust, and why neither of us felt truly seen. But I didn't tell him everything. I didn't tell him my mom worked 2 shifts at a nursing home and still couldn't afford her insulin. I didn't tell him I had student loans bigger than his car. I didn't tell him I sometimes skipped meals so I could afford textbooks. I was scared he'd look at me differently, like I was a project, not a person. So I laughed off his family questions, dodged anything about money. I wore Goodwill jeans like they were vintage. I played the part of the mysterious cool girl who didn't care. But deep down, I cared. Because I knew that one day the truth would surface. And I didn't know if he'd love the real me, or the version I let him see. Now, sitting at that gala, with 50 grand in hush money burning in my lap, I realized something. You can only hide your story for so long. Eventually, your roots crack through the concrete. And when they do, the question isn't, can you be accepted? It's, are you ready to stop apologizing for who you are? I told myself I was ready. After all, I'd met his friends, his coworkers, even his golden retriever. But nothing prepared me for dinner at the Harrison family estate in Highland Park. It looked like a southern version of Buckingham Palace. Gated, marble everywhere, candles that probably cost more than my month's rent. I'd practiced my handshake, my yes ma'am, even Googled which fork to use for salad. I thought I was being paranoid. But from the moment Linda opened that door with her pearl necklace and Botox smile, I felt it. That subtle chill in the air, like I'd just tracked mud into their perfect world. She didn't attack me outright. No, she was smarter than that. Olivia, I just love how confident you are, she said, barely 3 sips into her Chardonnay. It's rare for someone with less formal education to carry themselves so well. Less formal? I'd worked 2 jobs to pay my way through community college, graduated with honors, and got accepted into a psych master's program. but all she saw was a resume that didn't start with Stanford. Then came the questions, the ones that sound innocent until you listen close. What do your parents do again? Dallas, huh? Is that near the arts district or a little further out? Did you meet Ryan at work, or were you his barista? I smiled. I deflected. I played the game. Because I didn't want Ryan to feel torn. I didn't want him to choose between me and blood. But I saw it. The tightening of his jaw. The way he reached for my hand under the table. He knew. He just didn't know how to fix it. And that's when I started keeping a journal. Not out of spite, but survival. A way to document the cracks forming beneath the surface. The psychology behind microaggressions. The patterns of power and passive hostility. I wasn't just meeting his family, I was meeting a system. One built on class, appearance, and curated civility. But the real breaking point? That would come behind closed doors. And that's exactly where we're going next. They say real conversations don't happen at the dinner table. They happen in the car, in the kitchen, behind closed doors. And that night, back at Ryan's penthouse, the masks finally came off. He slammed the front door a little too hard, tossed his keys on the counter like they'd betrayed him, and let out a deep, tired breath. I'm sorry, he muttered almost to himself. Yeah, she's complicated. Complicated? That's what you call it when someone surgically slices you with smiles? I didn't say anything right away. I just sat there on his suede couch, surrounded by furniture that looked like a Crate and Barrel ad, and suddenly felt like a squatter in my own relationship. He looked at me, genuinely pained. I love you, Liv. I don't care what my mom thinks. But that was the problem, wasn't it? Because it wasn't just his mom. It was the air he breathed. The family name engraved on every building. The unspoken rules passed down with each trust fund. And me? I was an outsider with ambition, and that made me dangerous. I wanted to believe him, but I also knew psychology. I'd studied how systems protect themselves, how privilege makes even good people complicit without realizing it. So I started writing everything down. Every comment, every glance, every pattern. Not to expose him, but to understand what I was really up against. I wrote like my life depended on it. And in a way, it did. Because journaling wasn't just a coping tool. It became a map, a blueprint for navigating the quiet war I'd stepped into. But here's the thing about pressure. It builds. And eventually, something has to crack. What I didn't realize then, what I couldn't have known, was that the moment of reckoning was already coming. It wasn't going to be private. It wasn't going to be quiet. It was going to happen in front of everyone. At a gala, with 50 grand and a microphone. You'd think after that night things would get better. They didn't. They just got smarter. Linda didn't confront me again. Not directly. No, she shifted tactics. Less fire, more ice. Smiles with sharp edges. Compliments that cut deeper than insults ever could. You're so brave, she said once, pursuing psychology without the safety net of a real degree. Another time, she handed me a book called Etiquette for Modern Women with a sticky note. Thought this might help you at Ryan's cousin's wedding. She wasn't yelling, she wasn't cursing. She was eroding, slowly, subtly, elegantly. I felt like I was being rewritten, gaslit by someone who wore Chanel and weaponized charm. At first, I doubted myself. Was I too sensitive, too defensive? Maybe I was being difficult. But then I flipped through my journal. Every time she questioned my intentions. Every time she accidentally left me out of group texts. Every time she made a point of announcing how she loves giving back to those less fortunate, while looking right at me. And that's when it clicked. This wasn't just about me. It was about control. Linda wasn't trying to protect Ryan. She was trying to preserve a dynasty. She saw me as a virus, and she wanted to quarantine me before I spread. So I went back to my psych notes. Narcissistic projection, triangulation, ego preservation, everything fit. She wasn't just a disapproving mom. She was a master manipulator in pearls. But here's the wild part. Once I saw the pattern, I stopped reacting. I stopped shrinking. Instead, I watched. I studied. I strategized. And I waited. Because I knew something she didn't. When people like her are used to winning in whispers, the last thing they expect is for you to speak loud. And the perfect opportunity was just around the corner. A gala, a stage, a bribe, and a moment she'd never forget. And then came the gala, the same one where this all began. where Linda tried to erase me with $50,000 in hush money. Only this time, I wasn't the quiet, nervous girl clinging to Ryan's arm. I walked in alone, head held high, dress paid for with my own paycheck, a calm fire in my chest. The room was packed. Oil tycoons, legacy donors, influencers who'd never known a hard day. I spotted Linda before she spotted me. Still poised, still perfect, still sure she ran the show. She approached with her signature smile. "I see you're still here." And I smiled right back. "You didn't think 50 grand would be enough, did you?" For a moment, her face cracked. Just for a second. And that's all I needed. Because what she didn't know was that I'd been invited to speak. The organizers loved my story. Young woman studying mental health, overcoming generational cycles. I wasn't just a guest. I was a voice. When I stepped onto that stage, the lights were blinding. The room went silent, and I told the truth. Not the sugar-coated version, not the sanitized soundbite. The real, raw truth. I spoke about classism disguised as concern. About the quiet violence of being constantly questioned. About how some people think money gives them permission to define someone else's worth. I never said Linda's name, but everyone knew. I ended with this. Respect is not a transaction, and love should never come with a price tag. The applause hit like thunder. Some clapped out of guilt, others out of recognition. But Linda, she sat frozen, red wine untouched, legacy cracking at the seams. As I stepped off stage, Ryan looked at me, not with pity, not with panic, but with awe. Like he was seeing me clearly for the first time. But that clarity? It came too late. Because the fallout was already beginning. And once the story hit Reddit the next morning, there was no going back. When I walked off that stage, I knew I'd started something. But I didn't realize just how loud the echo would be. By sunrise, the Reddit thread was already trending. Rich mom tried to buy me off. I flipped the script. Within hours, it exploded. Screenshots, clips from the gala, even out-of-context quotes that made me sound braver than I felt. People started DMing me. Strangers, survivors, girls who'd been underestimated their whole lives. Guys who'd watched their partners shrink in the face of status. It wasn't just my story anymore. It was ours. And Linda, she was livid. She called Ryan, accused him of betraying his bloodline, said I embarrassed the family, threatened legal action for defamation, even though I never said her name. Typical playbook, silence through fear. But this time, the fear wasn't mine. Because something in me had shifted. See, when you grow up poor, you learn to make yourself small, to not rock the boat, to be grateful just for being included. But once you stand up in a room like that, once you speak truth to power and survive it, you don't unlearn that. Ryan showed up at my apartment the next day. No security, no polished lines. Just him. Raw. Worn out. "I didn't know," he whispered. I knew she was controlling, but I didn't know. And part of me wanted to collapse into his arms, to believe love could just fix it all. But another part, the part that had carried me through minimum wage shifts, judgmental stares, and now a viral storm, she knew better. So I said, "I need space. You need reflection. This isn't just about your mom. It's about what you let happen." He didn't fight. He nodded. And as he walked away, I realized something beautiful. I didn't need a man to validate my strength. I'd already found my voice. And soon I'd find my purpose too. Because what came next wasn't just survival. It was reinvention. When Ryan walked away, it hurt. Not because I lost him, but because for the first time, I chose me. But choosing yourself isn't some magical, liberating movie montage. It's hard. It's quiet. It's messy as hell. So I started therapy. Not the trendy kind with Instagram quotes and ocean sounds, the real kind. The kind where someone actually challenges you, holds a mirror up to your childhood wounds and says, "Let's sit with this." We unpacked everything. Why I'd minimized myself for love. Why I let microaggressions slide until they turned into avalanches. Why I still heard Linda's voice in my head even after I silenced hers in public. And somewhere between tears and breakthrough sessions, I started healing. Then, on a random Tuesday night in oversized sweatpants and zero makeup, I opened TikTok. I wasn't planning on going viral. I just needed to say something. I posted a 60-second clip. How to spot classism in romantic relationships. Just me. Raw. Unfiltered. Not pointing fingers. just sharing truth. It blew up. Comments poured in. This is what I've been through. Thank you for saying what I couldn't. You're literally narrating my life right now. I kept posting. Psychology lessons, red flag breakdowns, storytime updates. And somehow I turned pain into a platform. My following grew. Slowly at first, then like wildfire. Because I wasn't just a girl who got humiliated at a gala. I was someone who named the invisible forces that make people feel small. And the more I spoke, the freer I felt. But with visibility comes responsibility. And soon the people who once dismissed me, they were now listening, including Ryan. Because one night, in the middle of a live stream, he showed up in the comments, not with excuses, with accountability. But that moment, that conversation, it wasn't about closure. It was about the crossroad, where love and truth collide. At first, I thought I was hallucinating. Ryan's username popped up mid-live stream. Real name, verified, no burner account, no hiding. The chat exploded. Is that your ex? I froze, took a breath, kept going, because this wasn't about him. Not anymore. But then he typed, "You were right. I enabled all of it. I'm sorry." The air left the room. He kept commenting. Nothing performative, nothing dramatic. Just truths. How he watched his mom tear down women for years. How silence felt safer than confrontation. How loving someone without standing up for them isn't love. It's cowardice. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just listened. After the stream, he texted me a voice memo. Said therapy had changed him. That watching me speak out online cracked something open. Said he finally understood what it meant to unlearn privilege, not just feel bad about it. And part of me wanted to believe this was the movie moment. The grand romantic gesture. The second chance. But I'd grown. And the woman he loved no longer needed saving or proving. So I sent back a voice memo of my own. I'm proud of your growth truly, but I'm not your redemption arc. Because the truth is, we don't always get the fairy tale. Sometimes we get a mirror and a choice. Ryan made his. He stayed in therapy, started using his platform to spotlight underrepresented creators, funded scholarships for first-gen students, even shared my story at a tech conference in Houston. Not as a flex, as a lesson. And me? I kept rising. Because the next decision wasn't about romance. It was about self-worth. It was about finally letting go, not out of anger, but clarity. And that moment, that choice, it led to the most important one yet. Would I keep letting others define me? Or would I finally step fully into my power? After Ryan's message, I sat in silence. Not the sad kind, the sacred kind. The kind of silence where your spirit exhales and asks, what now? For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting on anyone's permission. No mom, no man, no mirror. Just mine. So I made a choice. I chose me. I turned down the let's catch up for closure brunch. I didn't text back after the podcast shout-out. Because I realized I wasn't a supporting character in someone else's character development. I was the author of my own damn story. And I started acting like it. I restructured my content, launched a full mental health and class awareness series. I got invited to speak on podcasts, university panels, even collaborate with social justice orgs in Houston and Austin. And the messages? They kept coming. From girls in trailer parks, from first-gen college students in community colleges across Texas, from people stuck in toxic relationships that gaslighted their ambition. They weren't just thanking me. They were telling me, because of you, I left. Because of you, I applied to grad school. Because of you, I stopped apologizing for being loud, poor, black, brown, queer, too much. And I knew then, this was the real reward. Not clout, not a comeback, impact. And that fire, that clarity, it made the next moment feel less like a shock and more like destiny. Because one day, buried under a stack of partnership emails, there it was, a short 2-line message from Linda. Olivia, I was wrong. That's all. No emoji, no excuses, just a crack in the wall she'd spent a lifetime building. And as I stared at that message, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt free. But was it real? Or just another performance? That's where we go next. Because even redemption has rules. I stared at Linda's message for a solid minute. Just 2 lines. No punctuation, no warmth. But still, an apology. or at least the closest thing she was probably capable of. Part of me wanted to screenshot it, frame it, send it to everyone who said, she'll never change. But another part? The wiser, more grounded version of me? The one who'd spent months in therapy and years surviving silent judgment? She just tilted her head and whispered, "Interesting." Because I knew this wasn't about me anymore. It was about her. Her empire of silence had cracked. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was pressure. Or maybe, just maybe, watching the world rally behind the gold digger she tried to erase had done something even money couldn't fix. It shook her. Still, I didn't respond. Not out of spite, out of choice, because growth doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it means letting people sit in their own discomfort, unreplied, unreassured. But I did reflect. I reread my journal from those early days, the trembling entries, the questions I used to ask myself. Am I enough? Will they ever see me as more than background noise? Can I love someone who can't protect me? And I smiled, because I had become everything I once hoped for, without needing their validation. Linda's message wasn't closure. It was confirmation. Confirmation that when you stop playing small, when you speak boldly and live loudly, the system has no choice but to blink. And though I never saw her again, I carried that moment into something greater. Because the world didn't need another petty feud. It needed perspective. And that clarity pushed me to say yes to something bigger than any gala, any viral thread, any private message. A stage, a mic, a TEDx invite from UT Austin. Because the girl who once hid behind borrowed confidence, she was about to speak to a crowd who'd finally learned her name. I wasn't nervous. Not like before. Not like the girl who used to second-guess every word, every outfit, every seat at every table. This time, I stepped onto that TEDx stage at UT Austin with purpose. Not perfection. Purpose. The red dot beneath my feet wasn't just a platform. It was a turning point. A reminder that even stories born in silence deserve to be heard loud and clear. My talk was titled, Beyond the Gold Digger Stereotype. I started with the gala, the bribe, the whispers. But then I zoomed out. I spoke about how classism isn't always loud. It's polite. It's polished. It wears designer labels and hides behind philanthropy. I talked about how people weaponize good upbringing to shame others into silence. How respectability politics choke self-worth. And how the most dangerous part of privilege is how invisible it is to those who benefit from it. And the room? You could hear a pin drop. Not because they were stunned, because they saw themselves. I wasn't just telling my story, I was holding up a mirror. And when I closed with this, your value is not determined by your origin, but by your ownership of it. The applause didn't just start, it erupted. Not because I'd said something new, but because I'd said something true. People lined up afterward, not to congratulate me, but to share. Stories of being the first in their family, of being dismissed, of being told they were too loud, too poor, too ambitious. And that moment, that flood of shared truth, it reminded me, this was never about revenge. It was about reclaiming space. About giving language to the feelings so many carry, but never say out loud. And while the TEDx talk was a peak, it wasn't the finish line. Because healing doesn't end with applause. It continues quietly, in everyday choices, every boundary you set, every time you walk into a room and refuse to shrink. Which brings us to one final scene. 1 year later, a drive past the very place where it all began. A year later, I found myself driving through downtown Austin. Windows down, same city, different woman. I didn't plan to pass the gala venue, but there it was. Ornate columns, marble steps, the kind of place that smells like old money and expectations. And for a moment, I slowed down. Not to dwell, to witness, because that building used to haunt me. It used to represent everything I wasn't. Wealthy, polished, appropriate. Now? It felt small. Not physically, spiritually, emotionally. Because I had outgrown the version of me that needed their approval. That girl who sat politely with her knees crossed, terrified of using the wrong fork, pretending she wasn't bothered by whispered insults. She's gone. The woman in this car? She's got a book deal with a publisher that believes in voices like hers. She's partnered with mental health platforms across Texas, creating scholarships for first-gen students. She's built something from scratch, without apology. And the wildest part? She's happy. Not the kind of happy that needs to be posted. The kind that shows up quietly in your gut, in your pace, in the peace that no one can take. I didn't stop the car. I didn't snap a selfie. I just nodded to the building like it was a closed chapter, because what used to be a battlefield is now just background. And as I pulled back onto the freeway, I thought about every person watching this video right now. Every one of you who's ever been underestimated, overlooked, told to stay in your lane. This story, it's not just mine, it's yours too. Which is why what comes next isn't about me. It's about us. So if this hit home, if you've ever been made to feel like your worth had a price tag, stick around, because I've got one last thing to say, and it's just for you. So here's the part where I talk to you. Yeah, you, watching this on your phone at 2 a.m., wondering if you're ever going to be seen for more than your zip code, your GPA, your accent, or the way you dress. Let me be clear, your story matters. Your voice matters. And if no one's ever told you that, let this be the moment. Because for too long, people like us have been told to be quiet, to be grateful, to not stir the pot. But guess what? That pot is already boiling, and it's time we owned the heat. So here's what I want you to do. If you've ever been underestimated because of where you came from, if someone ever tried to put a dollar sign on your dignity, if you've had to shrink, hide, or play nice just to fit into a room that was never built for you, drop a comment right now. Say, I'm done shrinking. Because once you say it out loud, you take the power back. And if this story hit you in the gut, if it made you rethink what you tolerate, what you deserve, then hit that like button. Subscribe if you're ready for more than just drama and story time. Because around here, we don't just spill tea, we rebuild confidence. And most of all, share this. Send it to the girl who's still afraid to speak up at dinner, to the guy who's dating someone who makes him feel less than, to your cousin, your coworker, your past self. Because the world doesn't change from the top down. It changes when enough of us decide we're done apologizing. This isn't just a video, it's a movement, a rejection of shame, a celebration of stories that don't come wrapped in ribbon and wealth. So if you're with me, let's rise, together. Because respect isn't earned through silence, it's earned through truth.